Hey everyone, it's Alex Ball with another episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast. On today's interview, we sit down with Jarrad Hearman of Capland Acre in Somerset, UK. Like many other beginning farmers, Jarrad made the jump to no-till farming during the pandemic and been working ever since to dial his operation and maximize his production yearly. We dig deep on scale-appropriate crop selection, selling at multiple farmers markets, and using compost as a deep mulch in cooler, wet climates. So without any further ado, let's get to the interview.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crops, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and much more, all powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. We have been using a BCS tractor on our farm since 2014, and it has saved the day and leveled the workload more times than I can count. And I find new ways to employ it every single season. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. All right, enjoy the show.
Jarrad, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's pretty late there where you're at right now. So for folks who don't know you already, where are you located and a little bit about your farm?
Yeah, cheers, Alex. Good to be chatting. So we're Capland Acre. We're in Somerset, which is southwest United Kingdom. So for some references for people, we're 150 miles west of like London, if that's sort of your reference point. And for sort of bigger cities in this sort of area, we're kind of halfway between Bristol and Exeter. And then we're on the outskirts of a little village called Hatch Beecham. And then we have a town of 60,000 people about 7 miles away, and a town of 5,000 people sort of 7 miles in the other direction. So those two sort of towns are our main markets as far as grocery stores and our main sort of like places of retail, really.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So you have a decent market you can go to, and so where you're located, how large is your farm?
So we're probably comically small by most people's standards because we grow on 1/8 of an acre. So our entire property, including the house, is 1 acre. Hence the name Capland Acre. The house side is basically it splits in two, and so the house is on one side, which has a house and a garden, and then we have a field on the other side. So I guess overall that would be half an acre. But by the time beds are built, there's a certain area down the bottom that we don't use because there's trees and there's a stream and things like that. But the actual growing space is a hint over 1/8 of an acre. So it's 70 10-meter beds, which I guess what's that? 30 feet or something for you guys, and just a standard 30-inch by, in that case, 30-ish feet beds, so 70 of those. Yeah, I mean, that's actually what we're finding. Like we still, I mean, we've just sort of wrapped up our second full season, going into our third winter. And we only expanded, I think 20 of those beds at the start of this season. And we still haven't really used all of it to its full capacity yet. So I think some of those beds actually only had one crop in this season. So yeah, we still think that we're only just scratching the surface of what we could do with this space. And we sort of, we would have farmed on whatever space we found. We did want to keep it small. And to be honest, like, we were kind of excited and happy with the space that we've got. We sort of think that anything more is like, it's a lot. Like, so it's me just doing everything. I always, like, I'll say we, like, day to day, it's me doing everything in terms of the farm, but my wife is like literally doing a million other things to make it possible for me to like do the farm work, and she helps me out at farmers markets and everything. So it's definitely a we. But yeah, like an eighth of an acre, trying to turn beds over 2, if not 3 times a season, like, yeah, that's enough work for me. I'm happy with that. I'm happy to stick to that and just make it work the best we can.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can get a lot of production, especially with, double up on those plantings, get those rotations down. You can really produce a lot of food. So on that same line, you said, year 2, how do you get involved in farming? Do you have previous farming experience?
So I actually didn't grow up in the UK. I grew up in Australia. My weird little accent might give that away slightly. So I was a full sort of farmer's kid growing up. I grew up on a farm. I was like literally that kid, like riding around on motorbikes, like counting baby calves, my dad, and like literally a farm boy. If you'd asked me at 10 what I'd do with my life, I said, I would have said I would have been a farmer. But yeah, my parents split up. We ended up moving to the city. And I guess I was at that sort of age where my way of dealing with that was just literally like kind of shunning the country life and shunning the farm. And that was my way to sort of like deal with, okay, I guess I live in the city now. And to be honest, like, yeah, I love living in cities. And I sort of just moved from one city then to a bigger city. And then in the end, moved to London. And then that's where I met my wife and was completely in another line of work. And then, unoriginal story, like COVID happened. And we were in a 1-bedroom flat in London for all of COVID. And as probably happened to a lot of people, you start just thinking about what you're doing with your life, really. And we just sort of, it was just like a really small, just diving down a rabbit hole in terms of where do we want to be, like, where do you want to live our life, really? And what do we want to be doing? And what sort of story do you want to tell, like, when we're 80? And, what do you want our lives to have been? And so lots of small little things happen where I guess I discovered, at first it was just, no-till farming. Even that was just like completely new to me. And then, I guess regenerative agriculture and just like, I went down the deep dive into all of it. And yeah, in the end, my wife has family in this part of the world, and so we're like, well, how can we move to that part of the world potentially, a lot sooner than we thought of, like right in the prime of our working lives, and make living on some land viable, and with me potentially, making a career change. And market gardening just seemed to be something that the more we or I looked into it, was like, I can do that. Like that seems like a good way to spend your days. And 2.5 years later, so we moved out of London in February. We found the house in May. This is 22, and we started selling by October 22. And so going into that winter. So having said that, though, like, it took us about 18 months to move out of London in terms of like selling a flat and all that. So it wasn't like it happened that instantly. But by the time we got down here, we were ready to go.
Yeah. That's super interesting. Yeah, I can totally see that if you're being, kept in a small box, for retirement on end, the idea of getting outside and working the land.
Yeah. Like, it's probably not that original. Like, I'm sure a lot of people like thought about where they're at during that time. And I don't want to say like, it's not a great way to say like there were good things that come out of that, but like maybe some people thinking about what's the most important things for them in life is like some positives that came out of that crazy little period. And I don't, from our perspective, like, I don't regret it at all.
No, totally. That realigning. I think your story is something that really aligns with a lot of people, because they have gone through this process, or I think are still in that process of being, having been called to an ag background. So it's great to hear that you took that plunge and went for it.
Yeah, I guess it was just that once you sort of start, it was like there was no turning back, really. I'm sort of someone that just once you sort of commit to something, I can't see another sort of a side glance or anything like that. That's where I'm going. Maybe that's just a recipe or a tactic to avoid failure. Is just to sort of like just go in head, like, full on deep. So yeah, that's the sort of the path we took.
Okay, that's super interesting. Okay, so you were saying the town you're close to about 50, 60,000 people, major area, then about 7,000 town nests there. Is the area you're in a heavy ag area? There are a lot of other market gardeners in your space?
I would call it, I'd say it's an ag area, but there isn't a lot of market gardeners on our scale. So there are a few, laneways and stuff, like roads around here are like, 30 minutes away. They're not around the corner. So there is definitely like a small scene in terms of organic vegetable production, like in the entire Southwest and really across the UK. We're definitely probably one of the smallest. And probably some of the farms closer to us, maybe they're also just a hint on field scale as well. So it's not just sort of, as small scale as us. But yeah, there's a lot of other great farms around us, and it's definitely like a community of, it's an agricultural community. But we probably have a little bit of don't necessarily have anyone doing exactly what we're doing nearby. So in terms of us like being able to go to grocery stores and say what we're up to and what our story is, there were sort of just open doors waiting for us, really. So we haven't really felt like we've had to sort of outcompete other people. We sort of just felt like there actually was, and this is just pure luck, like there was actually some doors waiting to be opened as soon as we started approaching people.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're selling to grocery stores. So how did that work? And the process of approaching, I know it's different based on where your location and everything like that, but how did you initially create those relationships with those sellers?
I guess because we just had stuff that was like, well, we got to do something with this. So like we first started, growing into that winter in 22. And by sort of October and November, we had a salad mix ready to go. And we had too much just to sell sort of direct to people, like say in the village. And we were doing some very small farmers markets. Like that's maybe something else to touch upon. But the farmers markets down here they're quite different than what I gather from most centers in the States, whereas like down here, there isn't like one consistent farmers market every weekend that's the same all the time. It's more like they rotate once a week. And so you might do the same market once a month. And so there's sort of smaller scales of those and then, sort of more medium scales. And then once you get to the bigger ones, then that's when maybe there might be one midweek market or something like that. That's the same market every week. So we do like a different market every weekend and that rotates every month. We didn't have any markets of a size enough to be selling a salad mix at that point. So it was literally like, well, I've got to do something with this. So I just, I got in touch with the local grocery store, just one at the time. And, I purposely sort of chose the smaller grocery store and just started selling salad bags down there. And then once I felt pretty confident with being able to, keep that consistent, then started, speaking to a chef and started selling to restaurants, one restaurant in particular. And then moved on to the grocery store in the bigger town as well. And so that was sort of from about 4 or 5 months, maybe about 6 months in, we were selling at then 2 grocery stores and a restaurant. And then that was all sort of our first main sort of 18 months. And then this last season, we upped that to another 2 restaurants and another kind of like a community shop as well as bigger farmers markets. So essentially we've got like retail during the week and then farmers markets each Saturday or Sunday.
Okay, wow. So it sounds like you really scaled organically pretty quickly then.
Yeah, actually maybe phrasing it that way is a good way. Like organically just based on what we had and we didn't want to throw stuff in the bin. And I guess, there were some tactics in that as well. Like I was trying to be realistic. Like I didn't just want to grow a bunch of stuff and then maybe it's just referring to that sort of like, pushing or pulling on a market. Like I wanted to try and work out what the demand was before I started growing stuff. And then also just really trying to be tactical about what we can actually grow on our scale. So we do have a few people that we like deliver directly to, like in the UK, that's mostly known as like a veg bag, as opposed to say a CSA. And we thought we'd actually go that route early on, but then pretty much quickly realized that on our scale, that's just not something that is realistic. And also just from a skill set, like I think it takes a lot of skill to be able to do that week in, week out. So we didn't really push that any further. And then because of that, I realized that if I just focus on, this is nothing original, like those quick growing crops, the high in demand stuff, the stuff that you can sell at a farmer's market and get a decent return on, then we can at least have, even on our scale, a pretty attractive, say, booth on a weekend, and maybe have a superficial, maybe a veneer of like stuff changing throughout the season, when really it's not. It's basically like 6 or 7 things, and maybe a couple of things are changing, but then keeping the salad mix consistent to grocery stores week in, week out. And then we also, we did microgreens as well. So we do microgreens to grocery stores as well. So that sort of helped be that extra little thing to add to the salad mix to retail during the week, to then, help basically make the retail during the week work well with what then we can sell on weekends.
It sounds like you've really kept your crop mix nice and tight to really take advantage of that 1/8 acre of land.
Yeah. There's definitely there's already things that we just like won't do anymore. But actually, I was thinking about this earlier. It's not necessarily because they're not profitable. It's just like the time it takes. So there's some stuff that everyone probably on our scale would say you should be doing, but we don't. Right? Yeah, we don't do, just because of like they take up too much of my time. So the first thing that comes to my head is like this winter, we're not doing spinach, just because I find personally we'll probably get on to pests, but if you speak to anyone in the UK right now, slugs is just going to end up being something in the conversation. But basically like overwintered spinach for us, like slugs will just like make a mess of it, and so I won't get that nice sort of baby leaf spinach crop in winter. And so there isn't. Instead, I'll spend most of winter like tidying up or cleaning up the spinach so it looks half decent, so that by the time then sort of March, April comes around, okay, then you're getting like a bounty of spinach. But actually there was 5 or 6 months there where it sat there looking ugly, just wasting my time. And it's like, well, I could just have something else in there and just say, maybe do a spring sowing of spinach, and actually with way less labor, just make as much money on that same bed. So things like that, like we're not doing. I might do them at another point, don't get me wrong. But then at the same time, we do some longer crops, like say purple sprouting broccoli, some stuff that we can have in some, I guess, like hunger gaps and maybe other points in the season where we don't have a lot of variation, which even though they don't make much money, for that handful of people that we do direct deliver to, and those people that see us at farmers markets, there's something different, say that month. And even though, we barely yielded much off it, it's sort of like, just having some different sort of seasonal stuff there that gives the impression that stuff is changing throughout the year.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like customers sometimes kind of they kind of feel as if they get bored with items quick. So if you just change it out a little bit slightly, you can get that appearance of, brand new variety. They get really excited pretty quickly again. Yeah,
I find like even just one thing, not necessarily even like every week, like if, a couple of things have come in and out over the course of a month, like people are happy. But, for the most part, people want their staples, and maybe there's something else to have a chat about. And that's all really. Like we realized pretty early on that if we're at a decent market, and like our markets are still relatively small, but if we're at a decent market and we've got a stack of carrots, a stack of beets, lettuce mix, microgreens, and just a few other things, like that's enough to draw people in. And just some extra sort of candy there on the table, like gets people talking, and maybe, gets people excited that it's sort of fresh and colourful and whatever. But yeah, it's just sort of like the exciting, quick growing staples and just a few other things that also just are quick to harvest. Because that's the other thing, just like one person harvesting and processing everything, like it just takes time. So we need some stuff that I can just be like, cool, that I can just go grab that now and it's done. Yeah. You really have to balance your labor availability with the crops you grow. And that's kind of a good transition. So you said, it's mainly you on the farm. Do you ever bring any extra labor to help you out with the markets? Or are you doing every single aspect of it? I mean, I said it earlier on, but like my wife, Debbie, definitely hears every idea, hears every problem, gives me feedback on everything. Like she's definitely been there for the entire ride, and she does help me out at market. So generally, at least half the time, like there's a tool list at a market. But in terms of running the farm, it's just me. And yeah, that is something that we're really trying to stick to be honest. Like, I don't really feel great saying this, but basically our business model is to not ever employ anyone. And like that sucks as a thing to say. Like, I'm not really proud of that. But in terms of like running a business, like our aim is to basically grow it as big as we can up until the point where I literally would have to employ someone and then scale it back, or then just be more efficient. And just never really have to head over that line where we'd have to get help in. Having said that, there's teenage kids around that might be definitely willing to like mow some lawns, and maybe I could just train them up to like do some like tomato trellising and stuff during the summer. Like, we might get some little bit of help like that in, but in terms of actually getting staff on, we're probably going to try to avoid it for as long as we can. All things going great, maybe that changes, and maybe we can definitely get someone in. Like, I'm not opposed to it, but from a business model, we're essentially just trying to earn one like solid income from the farm. Like, my wife earns, like, she does her own job, so essentially between her job and the farm, we just want to have two like decent incomes. And we're never going to be millionaires, but like, that's not really what life's about, really. So yeah, we're on track for that, to be honest. That we've already basically hit goals this year, and we're almost sort of at the point where we no longer need to really worry about necessarily like being worried about making more money. It's more about, okay, let's just make this as efficient as possible, and like, this is working. Let's just continue trying to make sure this works well and doesn't kill us in the meantime.
No, I love that. I think you really have to set practical goals, especially when you start shaping the business and how it operates and how it's formatted. If you're saying, okay, we're going to hire 5 people in next year, then you kind of build your business around the idea of hiring those 5 people down next year.
Yeah, that's it. And I think from having that goal from the outset that we wouldn't do that, yeah, it sort of means that from the outset, I'm thinking like, is this like the most efficient crop to be doing, like for me, like running, like handling this all by myself? Like, and then why I'm sort of hesitating is like, the reality is like, I need to be thinking about that for when I'm 60 as well. Like, I'm 44 like right now. So, I still feel I got some energy, but the reality is like, if we do this, like, I still need to be able to be doing this in another 10 or 15 years time. So in terms of thinking about what crops work and, harvest methods, and just not sort of just struggling to enjoy it while you're also like, doing it, like just trying to keep that in mind as well. So from a business perspective, but also just from a quality of life perspective, just trying to like keep it all in mind and be continuously thinking about like, every week is like, what time could we have saved this week, or what was a bit frustrating this week. Like, I try and keep the saying in the back of my mind of like just don't accept the drudgery. Like, if something is just really not enjoyable, like, do you need to be doing it, and is there something else you could be doing instead, or maybe just like not doing it is just better idea. Like, short term, maybe okay, that you lose a bit of cash or something on whatever that was, but maybe there's just something else to swap in for that, or maybe that equates to some downtime at some point when you get better at doing everything else. Maybe.
No, Jarrad, I love that, because like on our farm, one of my advisors gave me a little tip. He said, every year, figure out one thing you hate doing on the farm. What's one thing that drives you crazy, that hurts your body, and then try to eliminate one thing you hate every single year. It's hard to do, but there are some things I'm like, man, it's helped, I think, save my body, like you said, the long term, because this work is just so physical.
Yeah. Just you basically nailed it. Like, that's basically what we're thinking about, almost like week to week. Like, what at this time of year was making my back hurt, or what at this time of year was not enjoyable. We something that like by accident this year worked out quite nicely was again like sort of pest problems. A lot of UK growers really struggled with carrots this year, and we struggled as well. But what we realized that by sort of accident of having a few carrot failures was that we realized that when there was failures, when we would have been harvesting carrots and we weren't, was the same time we had things like beans and other crops that take a long time to harvest. And we're like, oh, actually, just by chance, when we didn't have carrots, which on our scale are like, they're kind of labor intensive to harvest and clean and take like a lot of time. It actually like strangely aligned with timings of other crops that took a similar amount of time. And just things like that was like, actually, that was good to know, because maybe we, instead of aiming to have, say, carrots every week, if possible, it's like, maybe we shouldn't have carrots at those points in time, because actually, by bed space, we actually made, a relatively decent amount of money on those French beans. So like French beans are way more profitable. They took roughly the same amount of time to harvest and basically have prepared for market. So just things like that, like realizing that we don't necessarily have to have everything all year. And sometimes it's good timing for some things to slot out just purely from a physical perspective, and having time to harvest them. And again, without just having to work 15 hours a day.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
And maybe for myself and for our listeners who are not familiar with the climate or the seasonality in the UK, you mentioned slugs are a huge issue. Are your winters much not free? What are your winters like there?
Yeah, you're maybe hinting towards it. They're just not cold enough for most pests to just really disappear. In general, like, we're pretty mild. So where we are in Somerset, you'd probably describe it as, I guess, temperate. So it's relatively wet and quite mild. So the coldest we'd generally get in winter, unless it was like something kind of a bit extreme, is probably -5 degrees Celsius, which I think is like early 20s Fahrenheit or something like that.
High 30s.
Yeah, and so and then in summer, a hot day is like 25 degrees. So like, what's that, early 70s or something Fahrenheit. It's very rarely like much hotter than that. This year this year rarely got like above that at all. There was literally like, wouldn't have been more than say 4 or 5 days worth where it felt like it was sort of, above 25 degrees Celsius. And then, so it felt like we just didn't have a warm season, and it started off with a really wet spring. And I sort of feel like it just kind of then started raining again in August and just didn't really stop. Really. It's been a bit dryish the last kind of fortnight. So we're sort of talking 18th of November. But yeah, we've got a bunch of cold and wet coming in literally like tomorrow. And so we're only going to have our first proper ground frost tomorrow. And even that, like, it's not that extreme compared to what you guys are all used to. So yeah, in terms of slugs, which is such, I sort of express it that way because I feel like I've just had so many conversations about slugs this year. It's kind of like another conversation about slugs. But yeah, just so many growers just suffered. So many, just carrot beds germinating, just disappearing with slugs. And we have a lot of issues with our salad mix with slugs, to the point where we really have to think about it for next year. We're just thinking of just getting actually, caterpillar tunnels and just having our entire salad mix all year round just undercover. Because for us, it's the wetness. Like, if it's just easier for them to be where it's wet. And so if the ground is dry, at least, then it doesn't give them so much, it's not such a cozy place for them to hang out. Just the sort of the mildness and the wetness makes it paradise for slugs, and particularly this year it's pretty extreme in that case.
And I'm just asking, is that the primary pest you deal with, especially in winter production, or do you have aphids there as well?
Aphids don't really bother me. Like they always seem to, something always seems to come in and just like take care of them. So, for example, in the spring, aphids will be around for a couple of weeks, and then the ladybugs are there. Like it's fine. We've got some aphids now, but they don't. Like it's never really a big problem for me. Actually, the biggest pests are slugs and actually just caterpillars. And not necessarily. We've hardly had any brassica related caterpillars this year, but we just have just standard sort of green caterpillars actually in our lettuces all the time, and they're more of a problem than them on like brassicas actually. So that's sort of frustrating. I've noticed this year it was kind of two waves of them. Sort of late July, early August, there was like a wave of them, and then early October as well. So that's kind of frustrating because they sort of end up sort of eating out the center of a lettuce. And even if they rarely sort of kill the lettuce, but they just make a mess of it. We have to clean our lettuces anyway, but yeah, it's a bit of a mess.
I gotcha. So with that more mild winter, are you able to extend the season for a lot of those green crops through that time, or did it shut down? January, February, which is of low light levels.
No, we try and go 49 weeks of the year. So, basically to make it work, we essentially have to, farm 12 months of the year. And we try and take, 3 weeks off, like Christmas, and then the first 2 weeks of the New Year off. So, we try and get our salad mix 49 weeks of the year, so up until the Christmas, week of Christmas, and then we'll come back mid-January. January, February in general is pretty quiet. There isn't really farmers markets. They're just the sort of lower profile farmers markets those months. So we don't have a lot those months anyway. But we still, we have something, and we do need to tick over those months and early spring to really just try and offset how busy we need to be in summer. So like every little bit of extra sales in those periods really help. So we are trying to push things like all the way through to the end of the year. Trying to have some stuff, overwintered carrots, even some overwintered beets, just to have stuff, available, even if it's just a smaller market. So right now we're basically all like, we've got two main tunnels, I guess, and feet wise, they're probably 20 feet by maybe 70 feet. So we've got two of those, and that at this time of year, that's it's probably half. It's half the current salad mix, and then a quarter sort of a previous succession, and then a quarter will be a January succession, if that makes sense. So, we get an early sort of Salanova crop early in January for sort of like a March into April harvest. So essentially, those two main tunnels are really just around salad mixes at this time of year, and so that's why. Even just getting some extra caterpillar tunnels might take some pressure off those two tunnels to have so many, I guess, rotations of salad in over the course of a season. Because from a crop rotation perspective, it's not the greatest.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. That's what you're saying. And like just, especially with that wet climate, just being able to keep things a little drier means so much.
Yeah. And we noticed this summer I did a bit of a test. We had some outside, and then I did just the stuff I interplanted around, say, cucumbers and stuff inside the tunnels. Like loosely speaking, I think it was like 3-1 in terms of yield and just like time it took to regenerate, and just overall like yields off those inside. And so and also like maybe 3-1 in terms of like harvest time. So again, like harking back to what we mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, I could be outside harvesting like Salanovas, and I wish we were like that's like the Salanova promotional videos where it's literally just like grab a head cut, but it's not like that at all. It's like we're checking most a good portion of the outside leaves aren't marketable, so it's being really careful. Like, so I don't tidy stuff up once harvested. Like for me, I harvest it, and what goes in the tote, like that's ready to be washed and packed. Like I do all my sort of cleaning in the field, so to speak. that makes it a long process if you've got slug damage or you've got some issues. We've had some mildew issues as well this year. Whereas like in a tunnel, in terms of slug damage and just in terms of with the climate and turnaround and just how quick they take to or grow initially and then like get a second and third cut. Yeah, it's like 3-to-1 in terms of like the overall package. So that's why we're like, I think we just have to make the call and just grow undercover going forward.
Yeah, especially on a smaller scale. In having those tunnels, I feel like just gives you a level of security on that crop.
Yeah, that's it. And just this is, I mean, probably most salad growers know this, but the feeling of like, am I going to be short? Like the reality of being like on a small scale, I probably will always have that feeling, but God, that feeling sucks. It's like it never goes away. And the reality is, until you're sort of harvesting, like you don't really know. Like you sort of know, but really like until you start harvesting and like taking weights and stuff, and just that extra assurance and extra like knowing that, there's a greater percentage chance that all those successions are cool and I'm good for the next month, as opposed to whereas at the minute I'm kind of tight for salad mix and you're almost harvesting 1 week in a way that's kind of stingy, so that you've got some in 3 or 4 weeks time, and just always having to be thinking about what you've got in the upcoming weeks, and just like maybe being undercover like all year round, just I'm hoping just take a little bit of that weight off.
No, totally. And you mentioned a second ago that you do a lot of Salanovas. Is that your main salad variety?
Yeah. Although to be honest, like I'm still not that ecstatic with the Salanova varieties we've been using. I tried a couple of new ones this year, and we had. Relative to the kind of the wet and mild year, a lot of UK growers have just had mildew issues with lettuces, and we tried a bunch. We tried quite a few lettuces last year, and I settled on some to stick with and just commit to this year to just try and take the auditioning varieties out of this year. And to be honest, like probably 75% of them kind of under-delivered this year, and it's been a bit of a struggle. So. And that's probably just inexperience from my perspective. Like I just didn't really go too deep into the Salanova catalog really, and didn't really, I wasn't looking for things like mildew resistance and things like that. And just from this year, I've just realized that that has to be something that I prioritize. And again, like from a small scale perspective, things like like a bulk order of Salanova, it's not a cheap seed order. So you might let's face it, like you try and save some money here and there if you can, and like, or maybe another way of saying that is to get the reality is in the UK to get the better Salanovas, you've got to buy the bigger seed packs. Like you're not buying 100 seeds or 500 seeds. Like the better ones are 2,000, 5,000 like seeds in a packet. Whereas we might only do like 10,000 lettuce heads a year or something like that, probably maybe not even that much. And so when you're still like trying varieties, like that's kind of like a big call. Like, do I have like half of this left over if I don't like the variety? And that kind of happened a little bit this year. There was a couple I tried and I was like, I'm not trying that one again. Salanova is the main one, but we try and mix that up with quite a lot of other things just throughout the year. So right now in winter, we do. I just combine red and green Mizunas and red and green mustards to just basically have I just call it like a spicy mix, and that's just your standard quick cut greens harvester baby greens mix. So that goes in with the Salanovas, but also we do a lot of chicory at this time of year. So radicchios. So from about early September, that becomes like quite a big thing, just because that's when lettuces really start to struggle here climate-wise. So radicchios come in to be honest, just add some weight, but they're just beautiful as well. And they tend to like grab people's eye. There's still like a flavor that UK people are kind of catching on to. It's not like everyone loves like bitter leaves over here, but they're just from a grower's perspective, like they're like a saving grace. And things like endive as well, like other kind of more bitter flavors. Like this week, probably the salad mix is probably like, I don't know, 25% endive, and maybe only 25% Salanova. And we also mix our microgreens in there as well, just a little bit, like not too much, but just pea shoots, radish shoots, and sunflower shoots. And then, throughout the year, like that changes. Just we try and make it like quite a seasonal mix. So, essentially brassica, baby leaves, when flea beetle is not an issue. And then, like this year, I even did like red dandelion, like red chicory as a baby leaf. And again, that's a pretty bitter flavor. And I was kind of heavy-handed with it, to be honest. And that, that was in the mix when it was like when we were selling the most of it. So I try not to be too, I try and give people credit in terms of their willingness to just have a salad mix that's maybe got some unconventional flavors. So we just roll with it. I probably won't do as much of that next year, but we try and actually have quite a lot of variety in there. And most people, like that's what they talk about. Like they don't really necessarily care too much about what things are specifically. They just don't want sort of generic salad. So, like for example, like I don't think people would be that impressed if I just did a red and green Salanova mix here. I don't really think that would sell. People kind of expect something a little bit different. And I think actually maybe that's just because in terms of market gardeners, I think there's quite a high standard for salad mixes over here. Most people have got a decent mix of a variety of flavors and little mixed bits that just make, a point of difference and like really sort of things that come in and out of season. Probably because, it's just actually quite difficult to, grow your standard cut and come again lettuce heads like all year round. And they're not healthy all year round. It's a bit of a struggle to keep them going.
So at your markets, are there quite a few other market gardeners or small growers who are producing salad?
So what's one advantage of maybe being on our scale is we do smaller markets, but there's no competition. So market managers generally will only have one stall of one type. So at most there might be one other farm at a market that we're at. And in general, they won't be doing things like what we're doing. They might be doing more sort of conventional, broccolis and cauliflowers and things like that. So generally they wouldn't be microgreens or salad mixes. So that's one benefit of being, sort of on a smaller scale. If we did up, sort of maybe go up to the next level, then there probably would be some more competition. But I think even if there was, like it's still pretty supportive. And I would imagine like we'd probably still kind of try and liaise with that other like farm a little bit and just sort of check in what they're going to have. And actually like, no one really wins by like trying to undercut each other. So it's pretty communal. Like I don't think, we're not really out to beat the other farmer or anything. It's more just it's in my interest to make sure that there's a bit of a point of difference.
Totally, yeah. And there's no real point to compete in these things. If we can all just find our own little niche, our own little segment of the market, and we can specialize, we can all work together.
Yeah, exactly. But at the minute we're basically just on our own at most markets. It's, we're generally just the only veg person there.
Oh wow, okay, that's super interesting. Yeah, I think I've never heard of, back to saying earlier, of markets that rotate like that before, where you have a kind of that monthly rotation of sales.
It took us it was a bit weird when we discovered it wasn't what we were expecting, but we've since realized that there's some advantages to it in that it sort of keeps it a bit exciting. Like, so if you've got a market in one town and that market's only once a month, then generally when the people come to it, they're kind of excited to be there, or it is a bit more of like an occasion, which it would be, say, if it was a weekly market, let's say on a bigger scale, where, you're excited to go off and do your weekly shop or whatever at a big market. There's lots of other stuff on. It's more like a day out, like a weekly day out. Whereas like these are more like, okay, a monthly sort of, a bit more of a treat, which, we've realized like that has its advantages, because you're less sort of, I guess the people that you're trying to sell to aren't necessarily those people that have like planned ahead to go have a day out at a big sort of farmers market or a food festival or something. They're literally people that you're catching like walking past where they would have gone to their normal supermarket or something. But that farmers market happens to be there that day, and they're like, oh, well, that's way more interesting. I'm just going to pop over there and have a look. And then obviously they start to get to know that this is on more regularly and things like that. And that's how you sort of get the familiarity and start having regular customers. It is slightly frustrating. Like we all think in terms of like what weekend of the month it is. So you have a market the first weekend and then where are the second weekend, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously some months have 5 weeks in a month. So I sort of have to sit down at the start of the year and then work out what I can do those extra weeks. And so we've done food festivals and other things just to slot in those extra weekends. And like we don't have there's one weekend a month, for example, that we just don't have a regular market. So yeah, like just thinking ahead and slotting in it, like other festivals or something. So it takes a bit of organization and a bit of trial and error in terms of what markets work for us. But yeah, we've upped the ante on the ones that we've been doing this year. And for the most part, they've worked pretty good for us. They essentially, we double up our retail essentially on the weekend, which works. And, we still might even look to even jump up to another tier of markets next year. We're sort of something to think about next year at some point.
Cool. Yeah. And maybe when we're talking about the markets, are those run by like town councils? Are they businesses themselves? How are those managed?
Yeah, generally you have like an individual, someone who's essentially their own little sort of private, business, for lack of a better word, is just liaising these sort of events in the same way you might have, say, like an event manager or something like that. And so they'll almost like the market is like an event. So some of them are like that. Others you have like an organization. So for example, we've got like a Somerset Farmers Market. Like they're an organization that runs like different farmers markets around Somerset. So we do a couple of those. And so that's our preference, because one company will have several people running different markets. And generally, if one of those people's markets is run well, then it's a pretty good indication that the others will be run well and that they've thought about the towns and the locations and the promotion and all that. So again, like that's just taken a bit of trial and error. And generally, once you find an organization that's pretty good at running, say, one market, you can trust that their others will be pretty good as well. And so we've just tried to sort of slot in with whichever ones that we can, that we're pretty trustworthy with the people running it. And yeah, so it's working out.
Nice. It kind of sounds like the same similar growing pains of the first few years of a business, figuring out what markets work, what seed varieties work, what planting schedules work, to really narrow in that.
Yeah, it doesn't really end though, does it?
It doesn't.
And even yesterday we got back from a market, and to be honest, it wasn't a great one, but it is November, it was cold, and the reality is that we look at what money we make at each market every weekend, and we sort of think about how that averaged out over the year. And you can look at it as a positive or a negative. Being small scale, like we have to be pretty strict on, like, if a market's not really being consistent, then we need to just make the jump and head elsewhere. And that's what we've done really in the last 2 years. We started off with like pretty small local village markets, which is all we sort of maybe had the confidence to do at that point, and then just pretty quickly just like kept moving on. And yeah, we might have to make a call on a couple of markets for next year, but generally, like, we've never regretted a move. Like, they've always been worth it. And we do some pretty big like food festivals, and our stand isn't massive. Like, we're not, we're just like one table, but we sort of, stack it up and make it look like there's a bunch of stuff. And, even at a big festival, which, we could probably have 3 times as much stuff and look even like a bigger farm, but actually, it still looks all right. And, we can be there all day selling stuff. And I guess we just need to be a bit bolder, or maybe braver, just to think that, yeah, we can hold our own in a bigger market, and the display looks good, and people are enthusiastic about what we're selling and how we're growing. And yeah, so we'll see where we end up next year as well.
Yeah, and I feel like especially market vendors or market customers, when they show up and they see a table fairly piled up, their idea how big the farm is or how much land you're growing goes away immediately. There's like, whoa, look at all this food.
Yeah.
Their farm must be humongous. And you're like, yeah, it sure is. It's pretty big.
And like, let's face it, like, that's the reality. Like, the reality of that is then that's when we go into our sort of like marketing spiel of like, yeah, we're a micro farm, we've got 1/8 of an acre. And then obviously the conversation then goes from then like, okay, wow, like, you must be a big farm, to like, oh wow, you grow on that. And then like, obviously then you're off into a conversation. So it has its advantages, pile it up. Draw people in, get them excited, and then you can start telling a bit of a story. It's all the tried and true tactics that everyone's milking that, aren't they? So we're no different.
It works for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It works for a reason. Well, let's do a little transition here to your production and your soil health and how you looked at those things. How would you explain your production methods? How do you manage tillage and bed flipping? How do you see yourself as a producer?
Yeah, we just say no till. So it's the whole no till the whole concept that drew us into all this. We did an initial like plowing of the field. We did a soil test even before we moved onto the property and just got some basic info from that. There wasn't a lot to it, to be honest. Like we're just, we're on a clay loam that just needed some organic matter. We were low in most things, but essentially like get some organic matter, and in time it'll probably be okay. And so we did an initial plowing. We put out a bunch of at the time just horse manure before it was then harrowed, and then from then we built permanent beds using mushroom compost. Just standard sort of 10-15 centimeters per bed. All our beds are 10 meters, and from that point on, all we really do we keep it. Actually, to be honest, like this year, I've tried to vary it up a little bit. Last season, I was adding like a little bit of compost every like bed flip, and our bed flips are just essentially say lettuces, just twist them out. Some things I might use a stirrup hoe just to get things out a little bit more if need be. Most of the time, I just prefer to like throw a tarp on and just leave it for a few weeks if I can. That tends to work for the times during the season when I need to, say, turn over a baby leaf mix. Everything else we grow, I'm probably forgetting something, is either a root crop that comes straight out or lettuce that we just twist out and it's basically ready to go. Essentially, it's just either a little bit of compost, and I put down just some organic chicken manure that's also chicken manure and seaweed pellets. So that's my only amendment that I throw down. And so I was saying before, I was experimenting this year with actually trying to do less compost during the year. I was just trying to, I guess, maybe take on board some advice in terms of, not just putting down too much compost and just maybe trying to rein that in a little bit. To be honest, I kind of regret it. And I think next year I'm just going to go back to, throwing down some compost every bed turnover. Like not a lot, but just some. I've definitely noticed in the second half of this year that I feel like beds just aren't performing in the same way they were this time last year, even though they'd had, say, an initial, laying of compost at the top of the season. In terms of bed flipping, it's as simple as possible, and I'm even trying to keep that like simpler. Like, so for example, one thing we tried this year, I had maybe in my head that I was putting down compost, and if I was being honest with myself, it was just to make, say, transplanting easier. The reality is throw down some compost and you've got like an inch of like nicer sort of, soil there to like throw some transplants in. And so I bought like an auger bit, a 2-inch auger bit to put on an end of the drill. And, because I do like quite a lot of transplanting, I was sort of digging holes because I found it's just quicker actually. Like it's less time. I'm jumping around here a little bit. We use soil blocks, but I just found that by, say, digging holes, the time between, say, having the transplant in the ground and then waiting for me to, say, to come back and water it and get it sort of nestled in was less. It's literally like then a few minutes to like quickly throw the soil blocks in the dibbed holes and like they're watered in, and then the actual time that the transplants are waiting to be sort of like put to bed is like way short. So things like that, like we're sort of trying just to see if maybe just trying to minimize or be honest about why I'm putting compost down. Like, is it for fertility, or is it just to make like things nicer to sort of transplant into? Again, I'm maybe 50-50 on that. Like, I'm not sure. I'm sort of convinced or settled on what my answer is. Things like, carrots, like I tried to avoid putting compost down, but I've just settled that the jang just works way better if you've got like some compost down. Like on our scale, it's either that or I have to get a stirrup hoe and just sort of work it a little bit, because we're clay or clay loam. Depending on how much rain or how much moisture there's been, that clay can just get a little bit sort of hard and almost like a little bit lumpy, which the jang doesn't like too much. Like, it's okay, but when you're actually trying to get like real consistent germination, it can jump around a little bit. And the reality is like, trying to get use the stirrup hoe or something like that just to make it a nicer tilth, just makes the direct seeding work way better. So, I don't really want to be using the stirrup hoe just for that though. The reality is like, I'm going to throw down some compost. So I'm jumping around a little bit, just trying to balance between fertility, not overdoing compost, but also like just the reality of like, germination, and again, speeding up the process to make things more efficient. But obviously keeping in mind that, I don't want to be just using truckloads of compost just for no reason.
Yeah. It's a valuable resource. And maybe how is it an expensive product to buy in there?
So the quick answer is no. It's not expensive to buy. Like the mushroom compost we can get is cheap to buy. What's frustrating is transport. So the actual purchasing of the compost is, I think, really quite inexpensive, but I'll then pay 3 times that again just to get a lorry to deliver it here. So now our circumstances are a little bit maybe play a part in that. We're on a laneway where the access isn't amazing for a big lorry, and if a big lorry driver is just looking at Google Maps and trying to assess how they're getting in and out of our laneway, they're a bit apprehensive. Long story cut short, what I ended up working out last year was I actually just hired my own lorry driver to actually go to the compost facility and then bring the compost here, and that worked out. It's probably a third of the price or something. And so the reason that's relevant now is because our entire growing area is covered. Whereas when we initially got the compost delivered, the lorry could literally pull into our field, dump it, turn around and head back out again. But they can't do that anymore. And we only got that delivery this year because we are expanding and building new beds. And a lot of that I've still got left over. So that then adds to what we make ourselves. So we actually can make quite a lot ourselves just with crop residue left over. We've got lots of access to horse manure. There's a lot of horses around here, and our neighbours we can trust in terms of what goes on with the horse manure. But even that, I'm trying to steer clear of as much as I can. We can get wood chips, and right now we get a lot of leaves. There's people in the local village that I can call for leaves, and they'll just come and dump it. And so between all that, I can have I've basically got all my compost ready for the next season, sitting there. And so I'm getting that extra delivery this year basically meant that I could build up a surplus, or essentially I'm now a year ahead compost wise. And so with no new beds to make, and trying to be a bit more wise with when and why I'm using compost, I'd like to think that we can pretty much be kind of self-reliant going forward from here.
Totally. And like you said, especially if you build up that really strong base to start out with and have a really solid foundation, then keep top dressing with your own homemade, you can really go along for quite a while, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we got spoiled in terms of, really no weed issues, say in our first year to 18 months. We've had more this season, definitely. And that's another part of why I'm, the compost as a mulch, the reality is it's mulch attributes that really help as well. So, that's part of the thought process as far as how much or how little and when to use it going forward.
Yeah, totally. It's you said it, but that duality of the fertility input and then also that mulching aspect of it, I find, like you said, that the mulching aspect sometimes even more valuable for me.
Yeah, I'm tending to agree actually, and even just with that sort of clay loam soil, when the clay sort of rears its head, it makes me sort of realize that, the mulching attributes of compost and actually just keeping some of that moisture there, or just helping out a little bit, maybe just making me less reliant on, say, irrigation purely to stop the clay kind of drying out. If I can say that another way, maybe I don't think the crop necessarily needs the water, but it's kind of if I don't irrigate now, in 3 weeks' time when that crop comes out and I want to, say, direct seed another crop or something else is going in there, I'm going to have to really over-irrigate that to basically bring it back up to a good place for it to be for its next crop to go in. So just having that mulch down just sort of helps that a little bit more as well.
No, totally. And if you can access it at that cheaper rate and hire your own driver, that seems like a pretty financially sound way to do this.
Yeah, although I don't want to do that too much. It did provide a bit of a stress at the start of the season doing the adding all that up, and I should maybe it wasn't cheap. It was worth the money. It wasn't cheap. I have no regrets. It's paid for itself. But I wouldn't say it was cheap. But yeah, definitely. Like no regrets on doing it. I wouldn't want to do that every season. We could, but I wouldn't want to.
No. And also the labor to move compost, it's not nothing.
Yeah. And even that, like just trying to work out like the best ways of doing that. Like it's all part of the discussion of how we use compost. Like that's putting down a thick layer at the start of the season, or in autumn for us, or over the winter. It's like, okay, I've got less to do, so I've got more time to maybe just like take care of that at that time of the year. But I'm weighing that up now with a bunch of our blocks, like trees just drop leaves at this time of year, and part of on this scale is like, well, do I do cover crops? Do I try and like build fertility that way? Do I use compost? And like this year, I've basically tried to get some cover crops in, and then just like they just got completely covered in leaves and like haven't really come up. And it's like, well, hang on, why don't I just wait for the trees to drop their leaves, and that covers the beds over winter? Like maybe just like not worry about all that, and then I can just mow the leaves in the spring and crack on, really. So yeah, there's so many things I'm not even maybe articulating it well because I haven't really settled on what my own thought processes on it are. But yeah, again, as we said, just balancing like time, fertility, and what's genuinely best for what you're maybe currently planting or planning to plant, versus what just maybe makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I feel like we often, we start out with the best intentions, and then it's like, what can we get rid of that we just can't? Like, it's so much stuff to do. It's like, you know what, I could just not do that right now and do something else instead.
Absolutely. And yeah, like, I mean, obviously, like this is only our second season. Like I'm a newbie. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So like I could completely have different opinions like in 6 months' time. So it's I'd be lying if really anything that I was doing was too consistent right now. The reality is I'm making it up as I go. And like some things tend to work. Most things tend to work. And I try and stick with the things that work and try and just learn from the things that don't.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Like, just making up as you go. I talked to a lot of growers, and I was out to a friend of mine, and he works at the apple farm, like 100 acres plus. And he was talking to them, and they didn't have refrigeration. They're on this huge scale. And he was like, wow, they're figuring it out just like I'm figuring it out. They're just different scale, but they're still farmers. They're still just figuring out how to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I guess, I was watching something recently, but like the reality is like we're never really adults, are we? We never really know what the hell's going on. We're just making it up as we go. And if I was looking at someone my age when I was like 9, I'd be like, oh yeah, they know what they're doing, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Hey, if you look at your photos, your site looks good, it looks clean, it looks nice. So you do something right.
We're winging it. It's all right. No, we're all right. We're happy. We're like, where no one wants to be sort of arrogant and like that and all that. But yeah, we're pretty happy. Like I think we've had some sort of beginner's luck, but the reality is that we're doing pretty good for where we're at. I mean, I'm a bit nervous to sort of mention this because no one really wants to talk money or whatever, but we're kind of proud. Like we've just sort of hit 30 grand worth of like gross sales, like in pounds, UK sterling, and like that way surpasses what we thought when we were initially sitting in a flat in London working out what a business plan could be for like this to do. And so we like, maybe I mentioned this now in the conversation just because like we still think we're winging it, and we still think on the whole like this year was like pretty challenging, and we maybe got half what we attempted right, and there's still sort of like so much to learn and get better. So that's why we're pretty like, even though this year's been pretty hard, we're pretty enthusiastic about where we can go with this, and like just keep learning from our lessons, really. And what's the saying? Like, you're allowed to make a mistake, just don't keep making the same mistake.
Yeah, congratulations! At 30K in 2 years, that's a pretty big accomplishment. That's on 8th and Acre. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're all right with that. Like, yeah, obviously talking about money is weird, but I feel like, I don't know, the whole like small scale agriculture, I'm not sure what the energy of that like is like in the States. Like and obviously I just view it from Instagram and YouTube or whatever, but I feel like there's quite a positive energy about it in the States. Obviously I'm an outsider looking in. I'm not sure there's the same sort of positive energy here in the UK. And like, it's been a hard season, and like cost of living, and living in the UK is like pretty hard. Like, it's hard everywhere. Like, I don't want to take like life is difficult points or anything like that. But like small scale agriculture is pretty hard, and so maybe only sort of mention like where we're at, just to try and like throw some more positivity out there. It's like, yeah, you can like, this does work. Like there's a lot of sort of maybe dismissers of, I guess, these trends of say vegetable growing that have come out in the last decade, and like I'd maybe be someone just to turn around and say, no, it does work. Like you can do it. Just it's not easy, but yeah, like there's the examples are there, and you just gotta like dig in.
No, I totally agree with you. And I feel like going out there and talking about numbers is just so hard to do because it's just so personal. And like we're all giving our hearts every single day, and we all want to be somewhere. We all, especially as Americans, we always want to be doing bigger and bigger and bigger. We want to, keep with the Joneses mentality. But like we often will say those things and then not talk about how much we're making, and then kind of hide behind it. And then you're like,
or pretending it's more than it is, or even less than what it is. Like, so I don't know. I try and like play the middle somewhere, but like, we can all do the maths. Like we all know what that equates to. Like, what the numbers I just mentioned, like per week. Like, I'm not, we're not millionaires. But as I mentioned earlier, like all we're aiming to do is just like have two adults earning a decent adult wage, and that's our expectations. That's happiness for us. So, where we're at and where we can maybe see where we can get to, even just with another couple of years of growth. We're pretty happy with where we're at. Like, it's, getting towards the end of November, and it's not exactly like the easy part of the growing season. So it's like, we're looking towards winter and be like, whoa, maybe things are, it could be a tough winter. But on the whole, it's been a pretty good year.
Yeah. And you said it. No one's in the farming game to get rich. We're here because we love it. And coming in with those expectations about what you want to do and what's possible, it seems like you really started out with a really good understanding of what you want to do at your farm.
That's true. But I think actually like what was good is just being like confined by our space. And so we were pretty, when we were looking for properties, we were quite flexible to an extent. But once we settled on this one, like our limitations basically dictated what we could do. And almost like knowing that from the outset, I think makes it easier. Whereas if we had, say, another 5 acres out there that we could like move on into, like we would endlessly be probably thinking like, okay, well, if we expand and do that, then that solves this problem. Whereas we just don't have that. In the end, nearly all our answers just do it better. Which actually just keeps it simple. It basically ends like in the end, like the onus is on me. So I don't really like blaming the weather. I don't really like blaming pests. Like in the end, like anything that's a problem, like it's my fault. Like buck sort of stops with me, and like I don't really mind that. Like in a way, that's easy. Like once you sort of stop like looking for other sort of like things to blame, it's like, okay, I just overwatered that, and therefore I've got mildew. Like next autumn, I won't overwater so much. Like things like that. Like as long as I can just keep on tabs of all that sort of stuff and be honest in terms of like mistakes I made, then I'm, just keep improving, I hope.
Yeah. Every year, keep growing a little more. Well, Jarrad, I want to wrap it up with one final question. Just trying to figure out, how do you survive? How do you balance working on farm, taking care of yourself, making sure that you can come back to work every single day? How do you personally do that?
Badly. Not great at the moment. But however, it's on the front of my mind. Like it's definitely the thing I'm thinking about. Like small things I do, like every harvest day, like I stretch. Like I probably stretch for 25, 30 minutes before I head out. Nothing sort of overly complicated, but if I know I'm going to be bending over for the majority of the day, I stretch. In terms of like start and end times, like I really wish I was better with that, but like the reality is I'm sort of out there for all daylight hours in summer. The other end of the spectrum right now, like it's dark until 7:30 a.m. and the sun's down again by 4:30 right now. So that, trying to actually take or make the most or appreciate maybe like this time of year and sort of being forced to like end your day earlier, and even maybe just like set that alarm to be like half an hour or an hour later, like just trying to roll with that a little bit. But yeah, on the whole, like we do need to improve. Like this was pretty much a 7 days a week year. And that's like, I'm not really proud of that. I don't think there's any like heroics in working like 20 hours a day and 7 days a week. Like I'm not bragging about that. Like that again, that's like something I just need to do better. And I think for the most part, that's just, like efficiencies and making less mistakes really. And just a lot of where I've lost time this year is just, certain things that didn't do well, but on our scale, like I can't just rip out a crop and, plant something else there. Like the reality is like I need to try and keep that crop going. And that might mean, doing a harvest that basically just goes straight into compost. So it's basically ready again for another harvest in 2 weeks' time, things like that. So again, for me, it's just improving and like trying to turn improvements into like free time as opposed to turning improvements into like, well, let's get another crop in.
Man, that's good. Yeah, that's real. That's real.
Wow. Yeah. It'll be real when I achieve it.
But hey, but you're working towards it. And like, I don't think any of us who are in our later years of our businesses don't remember the first 5 years. And that's why I like to ask my questions. I like to hear what everyone says where they're at in their business because, we've all been in first 5 and it's like, oh yeah, it's sundown every single day. we're making that.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
I guess. And then reality, like, I don't know, like maybe this is a question I could almost ask yourself, like people who are going longer, like maybe the flip side of that is also maybe don't be putting too much pressure on where you need to be in like 3 or 4 years time and thinking that all your problems are going to be solved then. Like it's you're not going to wake up one day and it's like, this is a breeze. Like it's always going to be a bit of a challenge. So, I don't have to have all the answers solved next year or maybe in 3 years time or who knows, like ever really. So just like one baby steps at a time. And like the reality is like just appreciating every time I'm like sitting on the sofa watching episodes of Bear or something and being like, yeah, this is chill time.
Hey, well, that's it right there. You got to find time to, watch your show a little bit and have some fun. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, Jarrad, Thank you so much for your time today. I know it's pretty late there right now, so I know this is a lot for you, so I really appreciate this.
No, my pleasure. Great to chat to you, Alex.
A huge thanks again to Jarrad of Capland Acre for sharing his story and his time with all of us. I'm super excited to watch them grow their operation over the upcoming seasons as they work hard to feed those in the community and deal with those horrendous cool season slugs. If you want to learn more about their farm, you can do so on their Instagram at Capland Acre. If you want to connect with me directly, you can do so on my Instagram at Old City Acres. Have a great day, y'all. Try not to work too hard, and thanks for listening.
All right, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Always make sure to check the links in the show notes for how to follow our guests and hosts. The No-Till Market Garden podcast is a free show that is supported by folks like you who contribute every month over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. That support helps ensure all the shows we do, from the Seed Farmer podcast to the Winter Growers podcast, the Collaborative Farming podcast, the Composter podcast, Growers Daily, and of course, the No-Till Market Garden podcast, can continue to go and grow. You can also find books and hats as well as an active forum over at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge thank you to editor Michael Sellis and producer Jackson Roulette for all their work on this show and the rest of the team over at no-tillgrowers.com. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and make sure you are subscribed wherever you're hearing this so you don't miss the next episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. See you then.